Ukraine continues its cross-border operations to undermine Russian military logistics. In addition to such short and middle-range operations, Ukraine also launches long-range drones every night, targeting Russia's military and fuel production and railway lines. Militani reports that the attack was carried out by the strike drone company of the 112th Territorial Defense Brigade, which is currently attached to the 3rd Separate Heavy Mechanized Brigade, also known as the Iron Brigade. The brigade published footage of the operation. The destroyed concrete bridge had long served the Russian army as a critical supply route in the border area, enabling the transfer of troops and equipment. Expecting a Ukrainian advance, Russian forces had mined the bridge with TM-62 anti-tank explosives. Ukrainian reconnaissance units discovered the planted mines. In response, the military launched an FPV drone armed with an explosive warhead. The drone hit the bridge and set off the Russian explosives. The resulting blast destroyed the entire structure. Open-source analyst Blinzka identified the bridge as located near the village of Novopetrovka in Belgorod Oblast. The explosion not only destroyed the transport artery, but also inflicted additional losses due to the detonation of Russia's own engineering munitions. Ukraine has been carrying out active operations on Russian territory in the Kursk and Belgorod regions for over a year now. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said, "Ukrainians have once again proven to the world that it is entirely possible to put Russia in its place and respond to its strikes with dignity," he stated. Zelensky emphasized that the Kursk operation was particularly significant. Global intelligence agencies did not foresee it. The Russians did not expect it. At a time when many around the world believed the situation was at a dead end, Ukrainians showed that we will continue defending our independence and forcing Russia to end the war, he explained. The president expressed gratitude to every soldier, sergeant and officer involved in carrying out the tasks in the Kursk region, as well as to everyone who helped prevent another full-scale Russian strike on Sumy and Kharkiv. We are defending Ukraine, and we remember each and everyone who gave their life in battle for our country. Glory to Ukraine, he added. As reported earlier, fighting in Russia's Kursk region began on the morning of August the 6th, 2024, when Ukrainian forces crossed the border near the city of Sudza. According to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, as of today, August the 6th, 2025, Ukrainian troops maintain a presence in the Hlushkov district of the Kursk region. Russian Z propagandist Anastasia Kashevarova, who is closely connected to the Russian military, has publicly admitted that an epidemic of hepatitis C, a viral infection that affects the liver, has begun in the ranks of the Russian army. The situation, according to her, is so tragic that other dangerous infections, including HIV and tuberculosis, are also spreading en masse among Russians at the front. And all this against the backdrop of the continuing replenishment of the army, with prisoners and marginalized people recruited through accelerated mobilization schemes. There is currently an epidemic of hepatitis C in the army. Hepatitis does not manifest itself immediately. Not only fellow soldiers are at risk, but also loved ones and relatives when a soldier is on leave at home. Kashevarova warns on her Telegram channel. According to her, the Russian army lacks not only treatment, but even basic prevention. Soldiers with hepatitis and HIV continue to serve on an equal basis with everyone else, ending up in the same trenches, on the same operating tables, transmitting viruses through wounds and blood transfusions. There is no treatment in the army. No one registers anyone, writes Kashevarova. She pays special attention to how not only sick people, but also deliberately marginal groups end up in the combat zone. Former prisoners, drug addicts, representatives of criminal communities. In some units, according to her data, drugs are circulating en masse, leading to new infections. Civilians should really think about the threat of an epidemic of socially dangerous diseases, writes Kashevarova. All this creates not only a threat to combat capability, soldiers weakened by illnesses cannot fight effectively, but also poses a real sanitary threat to all of Russia. The infected return home, carry viruses to the hinterland, and transmit them to their families and others. Against this background, the Kremlin's usual statement about the secondary army of the world looks especially comical. In practice, this is an army without an elementary medical system, without taking into account the infected, with an epidemic inside. Furthermore, the Russian military is suffering an epidemic of tuberculosis among soldiers who have served in the war in Ukraine. Local media have reported. The Moscow Times said a likely reason for the outbreak is the recruitment of prisoners to serve at the front. Tuberculosis is widespread in prison. Every third person is sick. The paper quoted a military patient who had previously worked as a prison officer as saying, "And when they went to war en masse, the doctors at the hospital said that before that it was almost empty, a maximum of 10 people on a floor, and now there are queues for hospitalization. There are not enough beds."
South Korea and the United States will launch their annual large-scale military exercise this month to bolster readiness against North Korean threats, the allies said Thursday, in a move likely to irritate Pyongyang amid a prolonged stalemate in diplomacy. According to Associated Press Ulchi Freedom Shield, the second of two large-scale exercises held annually in South Korea, following another set of drills in March, typically involves thousands of troops in computer-simulated command post training and combined field exercises. The August 18, 28 exercise may trigger an angry reaction from North Korea, which calls the joint drills invasion rehearsals and often uses them as a pretext to dial up military demonstrations and weapons tests aimed at advancing its nuclear program. Doubling down on its nuclear ambitions, North Korea has repeatedly rejected Washington and Seoul's calls to resume diplomacy aimed at winding down its weapons program, which derailed in 2019. The North has now made Russia the priority of its foreign policy, sending thousands of troops and large amounts of military equipment to support Moscow's war in Ukraine. About 18,000 South Korean troops will take part in this year's Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff spokesperson, Colonel Lee Sung-jun, said during a joint briefing with U.S. Forces Korea, which did not disclose the number of participating U.S. troops. Both Colonel Lee and U.S. Forces Korea Public Affairs Director Colonel Ryan Donald downplayed speculation that South Korea's new liberal government, led by President Lee Jae-myung, sought to downsize the exercise to create momentum for dialogue with Pyongyang, saying its scale is similar to previous years. However, Colonel Lee said about half of the exercise's originally planned 40 field training programs were postponed to September due to heat concerns.
한미는 연합방위태세 확립을 위해 8월 18일부터 28일까지 UFS 연습을 시행하기로 하였습니다.